Let's stop talking about national and international bands for a minute and actually go local. Let's talk about the very first step that any band has to take, and that's formation and performing in a local area. But specifically, let's look at some of the reasons why I think that most local bands tend to fail. Yeah, we're not here to talk about success stories. We're here to talk about what's inevitable for probably about 95% of local bands, and that is imminent failure. There are many reasons why this is true, and most of them I'm going to try to fit into this video and try to do so as concisely and as quickly as possible. So there are many things that you already find yourself to be against whenever you start your local band. Now, this is not meant to dissuade anybody who's thinking about starting a band from doing so. This instead is to act as a guideline to make sure that perhaps you are able to avoid some of these pitfalls and in the end, potentially make more from your local experience and turn it into a regional and then finally into a national experience. There's a lot of local scenes out there that are very famous, ones that we know and we love, such as the Bay Area scene from the 1980s for thrash metal, such as the Florida death metal scene from the late 80s, early 1990s for the death metal genre. Massachusetts was a nice hotbed for metalcore in the early part of the 2000s, and there are still others. Many local scenes, however, are, filled with bands. They're filled with groups that have some talent, or at least they have the instruments for it, and they try to perform shows locally for anybody who's willing to come out and see. These are usually shows that start with very small numbers whenever it comes to fan base, and effectively grow based around the band's talent pool and their ability to market themselves. There's two keynote points right there that you should probably remember for later. However, based around this, the dynamic has certainly changed here in 2014. It's actually been changed for a little while longer than that. However, we're going to keep it specific. That way we can effectively timestamp this, video firstly. That way we can look at it in 20 years and either laugh or long for the old days. And also, as a snapshot as to what the past was really all about. In the past, if you were a local band, it really took some sort of discovery in order for you to become a big group. In England, it was a little bit easier because the country was a little smaller, and if you happened to get on a bill with one of the major acts at the time and impress them, there was a good chance that they were going to put in a good word for you. There's a famous story about Wishbone Ash, which is one of the principal influences for Iron Maiden, where one of their guitar players decided that they were going to do sound check right alongside a member of Deep Purple. Yeah, you probably know which one I'm talking about. Blew him away, they got a deal, and now Wishbone Ash has been going ever since 1971. It's roughly a 42-year career going on 43. That doesn't happen overnight. Getting on a bill with a national act also doesn't happen overnight. This is something where you start off very small, and this is something where also you have to know what your capabilities are. Your capabilities as a band basically are also dependent upon what you play. If you're a covers band, then you just are playing other people's songs. And this is something that makes it a little bit easier. However, it also limits your national potential. This is something where you could become a very well-renowned cover band and travel a country as a cover band, but you're not going to be playing for 35,000 people. You're not going to be playing for 10,000 people. Hell, you'll probably be going from bar to bar on little tours like that. Either that, if you get big enough, you may get an amphitheater show or, something where you can seat maybe closer to 1,000 people. Still pretty nice compared to, your first show of 5 people and 4 of them are in your family. But at the same time, it's definitely not the national exposure that most bands quest for whenever they take this journey. If you perform your own material, then you have a whole new dynamic. Now you're being expressive. Now you are actually being the superstar by writing your own music, writing your own lyrics, and performing it. You have to make yourself marketable. You have to, at the same time, also be true to yourself. But you also have to work very hard. Here in 2014, there are many things that hold a lot of bands back. For one, everybody can do it. Now this has been true ever since the dawning of rock and roll. However, now, instead of everybody being able to pick up a guitar just to, be able to play the guitar, not necessarily be in a band, now anybody can pick up a guitar, pick up a laptop computer, download a free application that's essentially recording software, even if it's shit, and record themselves playing the guitar, whether or not it's great or whether or not it sucks ass. YouTube is also good for this. We have iTunes. We have different ways in which we're able to market local acts or individual acts such as band camp. This is something that literally is supposed to reinvigorate the DIY process, the do-it-yourself process, but instead it has just made things completely and totally oversaturated. The oversaturation point is definitely one of the largest reasons why a lot of local groups die. And it does so because whenever everybody is doing the same thing as you, where are your fans at? Where are your fans coming from? Now you might reply by saying, well, there are people in my area that are future doctors, they're future dentists, they're, future mail clerks, future businessmen. Perhaps that guy right over there is the future president of Walmart. That might be true. But that doesn't mean that whenever he or she is 16 years old, she's not trying to, be in a band. And that's kind of whenever you're, ideally starting. You're ideally getting those dreams together whenever you're very young. If you opt to do it later, you may have a little bit more of a maturity to you. However, your career is significantly shortened. So anyhow, you've made it to the point where you've written a couple of songs and you're starting to perform them. And you're disappointed at the fact that perhaps only 20 people showed up to your show. And most of them are your friends. Well, first off, you have 20 friends. That's a good start. But secondly, if you were expecting more, you expected incorrectly. It's very hard to market local shows whenever the scene perhaps is only so dense. It's only so large. There's only so much mass to it. This is something where you really have to cater yourselves to outside markets, be willing to do shows outside of the arena. And this is also something where you're going to have to gain a reputation within the small arena that you already have in order to do that. You have to shovel the shit before you have the opportunity to throw shit on other people. And you might say that, well, if I'm shoveling it, I can already throw it on people. Not quite the same thing. It's just like whenever you get a job for the very first time. You don't start off as the president or CEO of the company. You actually start off as, the mail clerk or the peon or the person that everybody makes fun of because you're the new guy on the team. If you started off as the CEO or the president, chances are you either had previous experience and a hell of a reputation, but they're not just going to walk up to you on the street and say, hey, Target needs a new president. Want to do it? Not even looking at your resume, ignoring everything that you potentially have done within your life, ignoring your jails, your prison record, and ignoring the fact that you genuinely like to rob the places that you work blind. They're not going to do that. There's an extensive process. You got to basically be worthy. And the same thing is actually true in rock. And I do have to specifically say rock. There's also where a large differential point is concerned. The attitude of America whenever it comes to rock music. Rock music is something that still is one of the oldest and most popular forms of music that we have out there. Now, the only ones that are older are genuinely vocal groups and, the blues and jazz and opera, things of that regard. However, rock and roll has had a decline in sales, not to mention a decline in prevalence, and heavy metal's kind of right along there with it, based around the fact that there has become a very pop and rap-centered America or American music scene that is out there as of right now. Is this to the fault of the people who like rock perhaps liking other things? Absolutely not. It is the fault, however, of the fact that a pop or a rap station, a popular music station, so to speak, will actually reach 6 times more or 6 times greater of an audience than a traditional rock station, whether that be alternative rock, whether that be classic rock, or whether that be rock/metal. So already the fan base is greater based around the fact that more people are hearing this music. And with the oversaturation, perhaps even you trying to send your stuff in order to get it played and get it on the radio is even going to limit it further, because not every single member of that audience is going to be listening at the same time. So, already we have a problem. We have the strange paradigm that we have all of these tools and all of these ways in which people can, reach you and your music, but nobody is still reaching you. Nobody is still listening to your music. You're still playing for 15 people. Look, your crowd actually dropped 5 people since your last gig. That's where the marketing comes in. You have to be a strong marketer and promoter for yourself. Sometimes you have to be flat out annoying about it. Sometimes it works, other times it doesn't. But you also have to make sure you have a product that people are going to want to see. You have to actually look at this like a product, as opposed to looking at this as my band. The product is that you want to make sure that your shows are energetic. You want to make sure that there's a lot of crowd interaction. You don't want to be stale up there. You don't want to make sure, you don't want to be just one of those bands that just goes up there and plays their songs and that's about it. You want interaction, but you don't necessarily need to shout commands. I understand that all of you have been to a rock show. I understand that all of you have probably been to metal shows. But it doesn't necessarily mean that whenever you shout the same commands that some of the bands that you've gone and seen do, that you're going to get the same reaction. This is something that's built up over time. During your first gig, you don't say, "Get this pit started," and expect all 37 people to start crashing into one another. If it happens, you might be onto something. If you get 2 people, you should still be happy. If those 2 people happen to be your parents, kill yourself. Marketing is absolutely quintessential and important, and this is something that may actually take a little bit of money. This is something that may take some time. This is something that may take some effort. No band becomes huge overnight. But then we get to actual money. Then we get to actual finances. And this is where I think most rock bands go right down the toilet. Financially speaking, they're financially extremely irresponsible. I understand that in the 1980s, Metallica was this huge party band. Same thing was true with Megadeth. Same thing is probably true with tons of bands out there today. However, these are groups that very quickly rose to fame. Their initial demos were quickly brought to the attention of local record labels, and they were given their opportunity. This is something that doesn't happen every single day for every single band. If that happened, then we would be so oversaturated right now that if some band was able to sell 37 records, 37 copies of their album, they would probably be #1 on the Billboard charts. And yes, it would probably still be Rihanna. Financially speaking, you have to remember to pay yourself first, but by yourself, that does not mean the band members through beer, through drugs, through extravagant shopping trips. It's for food. It's putting it into a band fund and using it later. Because remember, the bigger that you get, the more people you're also going to have to pay. You might need managers, you might need roadies, you might need techies, you might need people to help you out. And that's going to be something that's also going to come out of your pocket. What about your merchandise? The person that's working that tent, you might need to pay them. Unless you're just going to leave that merchandise tent unattended while you're up there playing, where people can just steal all your shit. There's a lot of different ways in which you can easily get into the financial claptrap of rock and roll. This is definitely not something where you're going to get rich overnight. In fact, for a lot of bands, it's not something where you're going to get rich at all. It's something where you may have to hold down an actual job for a while until you actually get a marginal deal, something that actually gives you the opportunity to go out there and tour. And that's something that's not based simply around the local economy. That's something that's based around the music economy in general. The way in which things are booked, the way in which things are priced, and what people expect from you, and what you get out of them. This is something that's not like it was in the 1970s, where you could go to a show for $4 and see Aerosmith and perhaps Uriah Heep or something like that. This is now something where to see 5 bands, you have to pay at least $10 to $15, and that's based around what a promoter is expecting you to do. Once again, as I said, I'm not trying to dissuade individuals from starting bands and playing music. I'm instead just preparing you for the realities that are out there, and this may not be universally true. The area in which you're in may be a lot cooler. You might have some promoters that actually do some fantastic things to promote music and not charge an arm and a leg. But that's not something that's out there everywhere. It's not something that is fostering and, as kind in every location and in every market. The final reason why I think a lot of bands come to blows are basically competitive. And not necessarily just competitive within the band itself. People are going to change their minds, either that or have differences of opinion all the time. That's something that's not all of that surprising. However, whenever you're fighting with the other bands, trying to make it seem like the only reason why people should come to a show is to see you and not support the other acts, that's not helping you, that's hurting you. You need to be willing to support the other bands on your act. You need to be willing to really promote them just as much as you were to promote themselves. There's got to be a cross-promotional pattern there, something that helps build the scene in general. If you want a strong scene, you have to help each other out, as opposed to just helping yourself. This is something that has its pitfalls. This is something where you're going to be sharing a lot of resources as opposed to collecting all of them yourself. But that's the thing. If every local band was playing individually one Saturday night, at 10 different locations, you're still going to have the same direct result. You're hoping that by collecting everybody in one place, that you're actually going to have and see a larger crowd, and perhaps build a larger audience. However, this is not always the case as well. The people that you really want to attract are not the people that are your friends. They're not the people that you know. These are the random folk. the random people around town that you don't really know. These are the ones that you want to give the flyers to. These are the ones that you want to have, actually see this stuff. You might not even know if they even like metal, but that's okay. If you hand out 4,000 flyers and you get 40 people to come to your show, that's a success story. It truly is. That's a success story of 1%, but that's 1% more than you had at your last show. If you send 100 Facebook requests and only one person shows up, that's that same 1%. But Facebook is a little bit different. Facebook is something where it's really not the same. You don't have that same personal connection. Personal connection is still the paramount way to attract people to your event. Face-to-face confrontation, and I don't mean confrontation in a way that sounds negative, but actually having a conversation and actually telling them about your product. I think a lot of bands fail, not because they lack the musical talent, because I'm sure there's a lot of bands out there that have had the talent and have had the ability that have never attracted a record company's attention, and never would they ever, based around the numbers of people coming to their shows. But they've not been willing to put the significant amount of legwork into the band as they probably should if they wanted to succeed. Just realize that whenever you start your band, that it is a lot of work. It's almost like telling a 7-year-old about the pet rabbit that he wants. You say to him, "Now honey, this rabbit is a tremendous responsibility. Are you sure that you are willing to, feed the rabbit? Are you sure you're willing to give it water? Are you going to interact with it? Are you going to pet it? Are you going to, be its loving bunny father?" And the child will, of course, say yes, and then the rabbit will run off 2 weeks later, and you'll never see the rabbit again, and you'll wonder where your $400 went, or however much rabbits are. I don't know. Many kids think that they could be in a local band, and they think that it's all well and good. They think it's a great way to meet girls. They think it's a great way to get drunk. It's a great way to express yourself. A couple of those things are true. But if you want to actually go forward, further than the local level, it also takes a whole hell of a lot of work, a whole hell of a lot of luck. And yeah, it also takes talent. It takes more talent than ever for a rock band to actually get up there. If you think American Idol is bad, where hundreds of thousands of people audition and only one person is crowned, that's the easiest record contract of that person's life, because they may have never even had to gig once in their life. And it cheapens it for everybody else. For a rock band, you could gig for 25 years and never make it outside the region. But this is something where your passion, your blood for music, has to keep you going. It has to keep you strong. It has to keep you motivated. It's got to be your driving force. You have to have the dedication in order to make this work. And I think that dedication dies with frustration with a lot of local bands. Keep up the hard work if you are working hard. Start working hard if you're not. I would like to talk about a fresh scene within the next year or so. What local scene that you're a part of may be able to do that? One thing that I know, at least from my area, it's not going to be us. It's a generic scene. It's always filled with efforts from scenes that have already blown up, such as deathcore or metalcore or gent. Kind of just following the trend, hoping to be part of the second wave, whenever the second wave is the one that usually is the killer. Instead of being a little bit forward thinking and examining the sound and trying to make something that's completely different. Something that has a rich text to it. Something that has a unique vibration to it. Something that truly is unique. What do you guys have in your local scenes? If you've watched the video this long, I thank you. I really and truly do. I mean not to insult any of you who are in local bands. However, this is just a heightened dose of what I think is reality, of what I think, or why I think, that many local bands fail. Thank you once again.